Hello and welcome to this meeting of Mr. Pwyllgor Council. Just a reminder that the meeting will be filmed for broadcast on the council's website, and by participating, you are deemed to have agreed to that. Can I start by extending my welcome to members of the committee for the online meeting and to the members of the public who may want to watch it later. The usual suspects are here. Welcome all committee members in attendance as well are Councillor Williams Price, who are welcome, who are actually here in the room with me, but not like Billy Noakes. And officials will introduce themselves as we go through the meeting. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and I've received a couple of apologies. Let's start with apologies from Councillor Gary Thomas, Councillor Michelle Simmons. I know Councillor Ian Thomas isn't here either yet, so unless he joins us later, we will his apologies too. Lady Member Colin Foster was due to join us, and he's been saw him earlier, so I presume he will join us in due course as well. Other apologies. A member of Audit Wales who usually attends has gone down sick, and at the late stage they couldn't reorganise to get anybody else to come, so I don't have anyone from Audit Wales with us today. I'm sure we can manage, however. So with that, we'll move on to we won't move on to the meeting just yet. We'll have declarations of interest. Any declaration of interest, personal or financial interests, relevant to any items on today's agenda. So silence. So you know we'll move on to the agenda proper. So the first item is the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 24th of November 2025. They are here for our approval. Any issues of accuracy anymore to the flagger? So in the bundle, they are pages 5, 6, 7, 8, and a little tiny bit of page 9 of the bundle. Anyone want to raise any issues? Therefore, we are happy to approve. So it's short, I mean, I have to. No, okay. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the wrongly titled on the agenda Governance and Audit Self-Assessment Board. It is indeed the Corporate Self-Assessment Board, the organisational self-assessment. Andrew Montford will talk to this. But just a quick reminder to the committee that we had this event was back in November as a draft or near final, before the words. Since that time, it has been to council, so this is to close the loop, moving back to us. But Andrew can introduce quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, exactly. This report was presented to the Governance and Audit Committee and Scrutiny Committees prior to decision. The decision was then made in December, so we now closing the loop around our corporate self-assessment report in line with our legislation. We used the feedback from the Governance and Audit Committee and Scrutiny Committees to inform that report. For example, some of the feedback around using numbers as well as percentages to improve clarity was also considered and will be taken forward. Also then feedback on how to present data. So for example, if things are positive, show them perhaps with a green arrow, whether that's up or down in terms of some of the graphs and charts that we looked at in tables, just to add some context. And perhaps we can add some further explanation then to supplement the diagrams and charts. Since then, we've sent the documents for translation. They have now been received back, and we'll publish them then on the relevant pages on our website. It's safe to say, though, the report has been published as part of the council and cabinet meetings and approval process. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Andrew. I can see Councillor Bill Smith. I can see your hand is up, even though I can't see you. There you are. I can see you, I can't hear you now. Still on mute, Bill. There you go.
All right now.
There you go.
Right, Andrew. The comments I'm going to ask on the comments you made, it's been to council and it's been to the audit committee last November. Can we have a look at it, because it's a big document, and I'm reading it sometimes like I haven't picked anything up, like there's no information. So can we either highlight the information we have receiving in the last 2 months, or can we really look at it and find out what can we do with it, because it's just a big document to read.
Andrew, I flagged this to you previously. I said, whilst I suspect nothing significant has changed, it'd be helpful to have a little understanding of what are we looking for in terms of differences here.
Okay, yeah, so in terms of differences, they are quite minimal. We did take on board, like for example, what was said around some of the presentation and some of the figures, making sure that they are presented in the right format, which has been done for the document. But taking on board what's been fed back today and previously, Chair, I don't know whether it could form part of the training programme for the Governance and Audit Committee that's being looked at, that we do actually look at our corporate self-assessment as part of that programme, and we could look at some of this in a little bit more detail then, in a similar way to we done with risk management.
Very, very happy to listen to that. I think that's a really good idea. We can inform how this is laid out. I think that'd be really, really beneficial to us in terms of a better understanding of what we're trying to pick from this. If we're here to ensure there is good governance, etc., then we'll be able to sort of have a chance to put in this. I think Bill's point is absolutely right. There's a lot of information in there. Some of it is prescribed, we have to say it, but maybe better ways of saying it so that a lay reader can better understand what it says. So I'm happy with that. Really good suggestion, Andrew. Andrew Wallen, who's online, I'm sure, has to pick that up as part of the training book.
Yeah, supporting our Chair.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Andrew? To just say closing the loop, I think you mentioned in the paper about sort of coming back to us as we enter March 26, 27, to start bringing back some issues in a quarterly section, particularly on risk you mentioned previously.
Yeah, so we continue to bring back corporate risk as per the policy on a quarterly basis. We also are producing a quarterly report which looks at performance, risk and finance, and that can be shared with yourself, Chair, and the committee. And then should you want to bring that into the committee forward plan, we can do as well. So throughout the year we'll have 4 reports, and then they'll come together then as part of our annual performance review, really, but also then as part of our corporate self-assessment report, which will be presented around this time next year.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And if we can also build it into the training program, that could be really helpful as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
The cover paper mentions recommendations. Page 11 of the bundle is that we note the report and we note that it has been approved by council and therefore it's already been published. So this is helpful, just to, as you said, close the loop. Are we still happy to note? Okay, notice anything use. Agenda item 5 is the draft annual.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just get the previous items of minutes? Can I just get a show of hands for the camera, just to make sure?
Sorry, show of hands for everyone in favour of voting agenda item 4.
And also for the minutes as well, please.
For minutes, so I can see everyone's hand is. Bill saying yes. Yeah. Thank you. It's a yellow hand, so it's still a hand. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for putting us through now. Agenda item 5, draft annual governance statement 24-25. Andrew Wallen is presenting on this. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. So this is the draft annual governance statement for 24-25, which accompanies the statement of accounts, which you will see as the next agenda item. So as part of its arrangements for corporate governance, the council is required to provide an annual review of the internal control and governance, which forms the annual governance statement, and it needs to do that in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Act and the Accounts and Audit Wales Regulations 2014, and is in line with the CIPFA recommended code of practice and delivering good governance in local government. So it fulfills a statutory requirement. So The statement is set out before you this evening. It's in compliance with the 7 principles, and it demonstrates that within Merthyr we have appropriate policies and procedures and initiatives in place to demonstrate that good governance across those 7 principles. It is an ongoing development programme. The governance arrangements are part of the transition programme within the organisation. So we are continually developing how we deal with the governance arrangements within the organisation. I don't intend to go through it in detail, Chair, but just to say that we've identified the significant government issues from 23-24, which are reported later on in the statement, section 7, and have implemented action to address those issues or minimise the risk moving forward. And within section 6, we've identified significant governance issues for 24-25, one of which in particular is outside of our control, and within which is the financial sustainability element of things. And we also have the fossil fan situation, and just to reassure members that work is ongoing behind the scenes in relation to bringing that to a better governance arrangement and minimise the risk. So the wording is very similar to previous years, because the more state of play the organisation is in is very similar, albeit, as I said, there are things going on behind the scenes. So there are examples of where we've complied with each of the principles moving forward. And as I said, it does form part of the statement of accounts, which is audited by the Audit Wales. So, Chair, before I take any questions, I'd just like to refer you back to the recommendation, which is for the draft annual governance statement 24-25 to be recommended for adoption, to be signed off for the leader and the chief exec. And then happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Questions, any issues, concerns anyone wants to raise with Andrew? Councillor Barry, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting pre-meet where we covered a number of issues. I think to frame everything we spoke about, on page 156, it talks about the council's responsibility for ensuring that its business is conducted in accordance with the law and proper standards, and that public money is safeguarded and properly accounted for and used economically, efficiently and effectively. The issues that we've spoken about in the pre-meet are, it's not what's in the report, Andrew, it's what's not in the report is bothering me. We've been through a year where we've had issues of public documents being edited, and the allegation that the Local Government Elections Act 2021 was broken. We've had issues of emissions of public broadcasts, a basic right of the residents of this authority, and the allegations of breaking the Local Government and Housing Act 1989. We've had issues outside of that with the allocation of funds from certain funding streams that there are certainly question marks over that we need to look at. There's the report that came in. I'm sorry to bombard you, but we have spoken about this already, and so I'm not. I don't want to sort of dwell on. I'll just go straight through them. Then there was the report that was released by the Nottingham Trent University Cardiff Business School, the NICE Index, the Networks, Innovation, Creativity and Entrepreneurship Index that looks at economic possibilities. And the associate professors who wrote that assessed 300 areas and authorities across England and Wales, and we came bottom of the 300. I know I've sent copies of that report to Councillor Salmon and Councillor Bill Smith. And it's concerning that I'm not even hearing that we're having conversations about that. Certainly as an indicator for governance, that would suggest we're not doing it as well as other areas. And in terms of comparison, that certainly is something we should be looking at to ensure that we've covered all bases and that the governance in terms of comparative measures by other authorities we're doing well against. There's just too many things in here. Sorry, there are too many things that are not in here that concern me about issues that have got real impacts on our residents. And good or bad, it needs to be mentioned in a statement so that the public can see that we're dealing with these issues. Now, I know we've spoken about it previously, but just a reaction from you, really, in terms of that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, this is your opportunity to shape the annual governance statement. We collate the document on behalf of the authority. It's not an audit document, it's a corporate document. And we contribute to it. As you can see, there's my annual audit opinion included, number of reports which we've issued, and the number of opinions and recommendations we've put to Governance and Audit Committee. But we also take on board comments and commentary and information from other officers around the organisation. So it's kind of a joint effort, really. In terms of those specifics, Chair, I think we can certainly take those on board, and we'll take them back, reflect on them, and see how we can deal with that moving forward.
I think just to break down a little bit, Councillor Barry's list of issues, I think we need to be careful. Some things are allegations, as you said, already used, and I think that's fair that we look at them and whether they're responded to. And sometimes they may be with merit and some they may not be with merit. And I think that the fact that issues have been raised and issues have been dealt with is a very fair point to put in there. Clearly, allegations which turn out not to have merit clearly shouldn't be raised in the public profile, and I fully understand that. But I think open and transparency is the watchword here, and I think it's entirely reasonable that we say issues have been raised. You know, that's part of governance about whistleblowing, part of governance about freedom of information requests, and though we need to be quite transparent about how those have come to us and how many of those we've had and how they've been dealt with. But one, you talked about some of the schemes and you think some of the funds may not have been allocated reasonably. If there isn't a natural home for a scrutiny committee to be looking at that, then I think absolutely governance and audit committee is a home to look at those things, and we can potentially build that into our work program to make sure that it is covered going forward. I think, as Andrew Wallen said, I think this is an opportunity for the governance statement to be shaped so it reflects the organisation properly. So I think that's all absolutely fair. Councillor Barry, come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just some reassurance that the issues that I flagged, some sort of mechanism around each of the issues, so we have assurance that they've been dealt with or are being dealt with, and that whether the allegations are foundless or whether they're found to be correct, there's a completion of that communication loop, and all of those issues, perhaps we can take it offline, but in terms of those issues, we need a sort of timeline of effectiveness of dealing with that, so that we as a governance and audit committee can be assured they've been dealt with, and they either need to be in the governance statement or they don't need to be in the governance statement. But certainly that completion of the governance loop needs to be completed. So we need some assurance on each of those issues of how they're being dealt with, when they're being dealt with, and possibly who's dealing with it.
Sure. Yeah, and in terms of the specific issues which you talked about, Councillor, we certainly take those back. Where allegations may have come through the whistleblowing process, that's just slightly more complicated, but we can demonstrate that things have been addressed and taken to a conclusion. Depending on how the whistleblower information comes in, but generally, if there's an anonymous allegation has come through, then there will be nobody to report back to directly. But to rest assured, if an allegation is made and the internal audit team are involved with it, then it will be investigated appropriately and reported through to senior management.
Perfectly fair. Thanks, Sarah, then Andrew. Sarah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just cover the first couple of points that Councillor Barry raised, which
So, we see you. Or you're in IT troubles.
no, I
Okay.
am. So I'm mobile chair. That's all. Can you see me? Is the camera working?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So just to cover the first couple of items that Councillor Barry raised. The first, the allegation of the editing, the recording. A public statement was put out on the website and social media at the time, I think a number of days after that council meeting, and confirmation there that there wasn't any breaking of any sort of legislation, and we gave a sort of open and transparent answer to what had happened in that regard. I'd also then, because the same question was raised in a previous Governance and Audit Committee earlier this year, I gave a similar update at that time. In relation to the second allegation of the breaking of the Local Government Housing Act, that was in relation to I think that was what Councillor Barry is referring to there, was the recording of the planning meeting. So you will have heard, obviously, and again, we've responded to that and included that in the same statement. That was unfortunate in that we had a technical issue in terms of the connection and the connectivity, because there were so many people actually who had got onto the one, were trying to connect to the one planning meeting. But again, there was no breach of the legislation there, because at the moment, it's only certain meetings and legislation that need to be broadcast. So, and the minutes were available. So, but again, we have covered that previously. But I'm happy to, if the committee want a further note, just, you know, or I can send through the public statement that we gave at the time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before Councillor Barry comes back, I think that's helpful. Particularly laymen has not been to be as closely connected to the organisation. It would be helpful to see the statements, and maybe there's a way of the governance, the AGS connecting to that just by hyperlinks, etc., or just like we could do with whistleblowing and other publicly available information. But yeah, we'll take that away and have a think of that. Yeah, Councillor Barry, come on.
The specifics of these very issues, you know, can be debated and reviewed and whatever. That's not the point of my comments. The point of my comments are quite simply, they're not mentioned anywhere in the governance statement, and anything that affects the governance or affects the ability of the residents to have confidence in this system needs to be within the governance statement. As I said earlier, good or bad, it needs to be open, it needs to be transparent. It hasn't been mentioned, and there's no point in shying away from the issues that we've had. What we have to do with this committee is we have to ensure that the public have confidence in what this authority does. And when you omit things, I just leave these things to one side, it doesn't instill confidence. So however these issues come out, they have to be dealt with, and they have to be mentioned in any statement that comes forward.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful point, just to make sure we don't run the risk of being too boilerplate in terms of. So I'm just while we were talking, I thought I'd look at what the AGS says on whistleblowing, and it says we have adopted a whistleblowing policy, and there was a proactive promotion of whistleblowing policy, and it doesn't go on to follow the next logical next step, which says during the year we had X referrals or none. I don't know what the number is. People referred whistleblowing and we investigated and it doesn't quite do that. And I know we have whistleblowing reports separate to this, but if this is the State of the Union report for 24-25, it's just joining the dots. I think that's our point, Andrew. Things have happened and people know that things have happened, and we don't talk about them in here. I mean, so maybe that's an area to deal with. I think that's why we have a draft AGS, so we have a chance to look at it and put our two benefit. Andrew, sounds like there might be some offline. I guess we will send things to you to consider adding in, and you can take it away and discuss with the senior team.
Yeah, that'd be very useful, Chair. Thanks very much.
I'm very aware it's not your baby, as you point face to say at the beginning. It's a corporate document, and therefore corporate response needs to be put together. I think there's some messages there, so I think maybe members can suggest some areas where I think there may be some merit in adding a few elements to this. Be really helpful.
Sure.
For example, timeline, and your recommendation says the lead and chief executive to sign. Signing date is the same date as signing the accounts, isn't it? So that's going
It
to
will
be,
be, yeah.
not being imminently, but so you have a little bit of time to reflect on some of these things.
Absolutely, Chair. You're right. Yeah.
Okay, we want to take those conversations offline with yourself and go to Barry and others there. Let's do them. Really helpful conversation. Thank you. I'm absolutely believe that you know it should tell the story of the organisation, its works, how governance works, and what we do well, and where we don't do so well, we tell that story as well. I think that's entirely right. And what are we learning along the way? Okay. Any other questions for Andrew on the document? So really minor ones. There's a past tense one there, and some really small beer, and I'll pick them off and I'll send you offline.
Okay, that'd be great.
It will be done in July 25, I think it says. It's like so we note the recommendation is that will be done by will be signed by the chief executive and the leader. Date is not yet, and I think our other issue is make sure we send things to you to fair time to get them incorporated. So we give members 2 weeks to get things to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
End of the month. There we are. End of the month. Let's be generous. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thanks for your efforts in pulling out together. I know it's like sort of keep them those getting all the responses from everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Agenda item 6 is the draft lead audited 24-25 statement of accounts. We have with us Dwayne Flynn and we have James Hopwood. I think James is going to lead on this as far as I can tell. James, we have the profile.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I was just going to share my screen to present PowerPoint. So I'll just do that now. So this report presents the 24-25 draft and unaudited statement of accounts. So we're going to talk about those accounts and our next steps if this committee recommends them to take on the next steps. I then just want to touch on some of the key financial outcomes and messages from the statement of accounts, starting with the balance sheet and the capital outturn. And similarly, look at the financial outcomes in terms of the income and expenditure account and revenue outturn, and look at how different statements in the accounts and different reporting in terms of the outturn tie back together again. So just starting off then, this report and this pack presents the unaudited 24-25 statements of accounts. So next steps, if this is recommended by the committee, would be to publish these accounts on the council's website and invite the residents to review and scrutinise the accounts. They've also got the opportunity to raise objections on the accounts and present those objections to the external auditors. It is a statutory regulation that we produce a statement of accounts. We're at the stage of having a draft statement of accounts, and now they begin the process of being scrutinised by residents and by external auditors. They will only be approved and audited once they've been properly reviewed by Audit Wales and once they've been brought back to this committee for reconsideration. Also, having now produced a draft set of accounts, the council is looking to further streamline the processes for next year. So this slide is showing the balance sheet, which is in the draft statement of accounts. So this is actually in page 214 of the pack and is also in the statement of accounts. So looking at these accounts, you can see probably what's changed year on year. So the balance sheet is showing the net worth or net assets of the council. So that's looking at all the assets that it owns, particularly land and buildings, but also what it owes. So those would be creditors to suppliers, but also borrowings that it's undertaken. And that net worth of 260 million is then funded by usable and unusable reserves. In broad terms, you can see that net worth of the authority is increased from just under 220 million to 260 million. And there's a number of reasons for that and a number of changes that have happened year on year. So one of the biggest changes that's happened on the balance sheet, which you can see in that top line, is that property, plant and equipment, effectively land and buildings, as well as, for instance, vehicles that the council uses to deliver its services, have increased by 55 million. The two main reasons for that is that we've had quite a sizable capital programme in 24-25 that we'll look at next. So the effect of that capital programme is to increase the value of our long-term assets that we can use across different years. The assets that we do own have also been looked at by an external valuer focusing on land and buildings, and that has also increased the value of them. Looking further down, it might also be worth just pointing out that long-term debtors has increased by 1 million, from just under 2 million to 2.8 million. Those long-term debtors are loans that the authority gives out to start-up businesses and to residents. So that increase represents an increased take-up of that loan. Now, other things that have changed are particularly an increase in short-term debtors. So last year they were 50 million. And now they've increased to 73 million at 31st of March 2025. That increase is because the council's had a lot more grants in during the 24-25 year. So in particular, it's had quite a lot of capital grants in, which again we'll see have been quite important in funding the capital programme. Another thing that's changed, looking at current assets, current liabilities and long-term liabilities, is around the loan position of the authority. So you will see that short-term borrowing has decreased quite significantly from 54 million to 21 million, but equally long-term borrowing has increased. Now, what's happened in the first instance is a lot of short-term borrowing has been transferred into long-term borrowing. For instance, one of the reasons for that is interest rates are lower in 24-25 compared to the 23-24 financial year. It's also the case that we've borrowed 13 million to fund the capital programme, and there's also been some realignment of cash balances, which has also meant that we've decided to borrow more during the 24-25 financial year. So those are the key changes that have happened on the balance sheet, which is a key statement in these unaudited draft accounts. So I'm now just showing you the capital programme. This table is set out in the narrative report. So that's the first part of the statement of accounts. And what you can see there is we've had a large capital programme of 76 million pounds. Now the outturn of that capital programme is broadly in line with the budget, but the key message around that is that it is a significant capital programme. It is funded, the financing is borrowing of 13 million. And as I've also mentioned, in terms of the increase in capital grants, there's been sizable capital grants that have come through to fund that capital programme of 60 million. So we've looked at the balance sheet and the capital outturn. I'm now turning to the revenue. So by revenue, I'm talking about the day-to-day expenditure of the council. So it's day-to-day services that it carries out. And these tables are again shown at the start of the statement of accounts in the narrative report. and they show in broad summary that we've spent 248 million pounds during 2024-25, and we've had 246 million pounds of income in. The expenditure of 248 million is being incurred in terms of running costs. So those will be our payments to our creditors, and there'll also be to employees. And then there's some other costs as well that are included. So there's capital financing costs, which are effectively financing that borrowing or equivalent to that borrowing that's been taken out in previous years to fund the capital borrowing. If you look at the table where the money comes from, there's some things that stand out there in terms of the 246 million that we had in. The first thing that stands out is a lot of the funding that we get in relates to grant income. So you can see that we're very reliant on the amount of grant income that we get in to fund our day-to-day expenditure. You can see that in terms of fees and charges, we get about 20 million in each year. And then you can see the other two key funding sources are council tax, and we also get a share redistribution of NNDR. So that's the broad summary of our expenditure and income on day-to-day activities during the 2024-25 financial year. Now, I just wanted to relate this back to the revenue outturn statement. So this was presented to Cabinet previously, and it reports against the budget. Now, the first thing to say is the revenue outturn reporting is set out on a different format to the statement of accounts. That's bound to be the case because the format of the statement of accounts is prescribed by regulation, and including the code of practice, which is set out by CIPFA. But when that report was presented, some of the key messages around that are that we had a budget of 161 million, and we had a net spend of 158 million. I've said that different figures have been shown in different formats and different statements. That the budget that we're reporting against is funded by grants, so some of those grants we've just been looking at, and also council tax and the redistribution of the non-domestic rates. So I just wanted to refer back to the information that already been presented, and then having done that, I just want to show how this information ties up with the statement of accounts, which has to be in a different format. So the key thing about the statement of accounts, which makes it different from how we report our revenue outturn, or one of the key things, is that we have to show funding which comes from our earmarked reserves, from our reserves and balances. We have to show that separately in the statement of accounts. So the first thing in preparing the statement of accounts is that we have to separate out that funding. So effectively in this table, I've taken out the funding that we got from earmarked reserves. So what you'll see is the budget that we've just been talking about, funded from grants, revenue support grant and council tax and non-domestic rates of 161 million. And during the 24-25 financial year, we've spent 163 million. So the spend has gone up because I've taken out the funding that's come from earmarked reserves that was previously dampening that down. So just to reiterate that, we've got a budget of 161 million and we've had spend of 163 million. So the overall effect of that is our reserves and balances have reduced by 2 million, which you can see there. And that reduction of 2 million is set out in our accounts as a clear message because it itemises our earmarked reserves and balances, and there's been a reduction of 2 million. The second table below it is just showing notes in our statement of accounts, and it's giving you reassurance that the reduction in earmarked reserves comes back to that same 2 million. Now, I'm showing you another statement now in the statement of accounts, which is a way of presenting the income and expenditure account. Now, I've just talked about how the statement of accounts are presented differently from the revenue outturn statement. And one of those differences we've been talking about is how earmarked reserves are shown. Another difference is that we are presenting the accounts, excluding those figures I've just been talking about in the narrative summary, using accounting standards. So we have to, by regulation, follow international reporting standards. So these statements reflect both the fact that we show earmarked reserves separately, and they also reflect the fact that we are including transactions and movements relating to international financial reporting standards. Those movements relating to accounting standards can include things like an increase or decrease in value in terms of our land and buildings, and it may well be that we haven't sold those land and buildings, but there has been a change in value. So this statement is reflecting that. So I'm just wanting to show you statements and notes in the statement of accounts and how they relate back to the information that's previously been reported. And sorry to present so many numbers in this particular slide, but I hope you appreciate this. This will be the last one. And I just wanted to demonstrate that the statement that we've just been looking at that comes from the statement of account, what's called the surplus or deficit on provision of services. So you can see this figure here, and you can see that's apparently showing a surplus of 32 million. So I've just shown you how that surplus is impacted quite significantly by these international reporting financial standards, which are making quite a big difference. If you remember when we looked at the balance sheet, we talked about there's some quite significant changes on the balance sheet, and the net worth had increased. So the effect of that increase in the net worth is being reflected in some of these changes relating to the international reporting standards. So once we incorporate those and adjust for those, we then get back to the information that we've presented to you already in the table. So you'll see you've got a figure there for total expenditure, and you've got a figure of total income, and then you'll see that that then comes back to exactly the same reduction in earmarked reserves, the 2 million. So the net reduction in reserves has come back to 2 million. So I've just included that to give you assurance that lots of numbers have been presented in different ways and in different formats, but that they do tie back together again. So then just to then bring that to inclusion. So the purpose of this report is to present the unaudited statement of accounts to you. They haven't yet been audited, and they haven't yet been reviewed by the residents. If they're recommended at this committee, they will then be what's called placed on deposit. They will be put on the council's website and can be reviewed by residents of the council, and the external auditor will then also review the accounts. Some of the key financial messages we've talked about in the accounts are essentially we've spent 240 million, and we've had income during the year of 246 million. So our reserves and balances have therefore reduced by 2 million. And we've also talked about the net worth, the balance sheet changes, and in particular, one of the biggest changes is that land and buildings have increased by 55 million. We've also talked about that change in long-term debtors, which is obviously by a smaller amount of 1 million, but it does reflect a scheme or a couple of schemes that are run by the council, allowing startup businesses and residents to take up loans, and it shows an increased take-up of that scheme. And we've also talked about the net short and long-term borrowing, and overall that's increased by 30 million. And one of the reasons for that is that the borrowing in year of 13 million, which was specifically for the capital programme, and we can only borrow for the purpose of funding our capital programme. We can't borrow for the purpose of funding that revenue, income and expenditure we've been talking about. So hopefully that gives an introduction to the report and potential next steps, and also some of the key messages in the accounts, and also how they tie up with other information and reports that have been presented to committee. So I'm happy to take questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, James. A really helpful half a dozen slides to try and summarise 120 pages of detailed financial summary. Gosh, there's a lot of work has gone into getting to where we are. We'll have some questions, and we can pick up next steps in a little bit more detail. Councillor Barry, I can see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, James. Great presentation. Certainly different way of looking at it. Can I just ask, going back to the balance sheet for a second, the asset value that increased, do you have figures on the ratio between capital investment and the capital increased value? Because that would show that, you know, how if we had a good deal there, if we invested money well to increase the value of the asset.
I think we'd have to do that over the long term. So I'd probably have to do some analysis around that. In terms specifically of the 24-25 financial year, we've effectively increased our land and buildings by 55 million. But as we talked about, we've spent 75 million on the capital programme. But one key point to raise around that is what that 75 million relates to. So when we incur capital expenditure, there's two types of capital expenditure. So one type of capital expenditure, which you are referring to, is direct expenditure on our land and buildings and things like vehicles which deliver waste collection services. We also, however, can use capital funding to provide capital funding to other parties, and we do not own the buildings or the land that are built from that funding. So there's a very specific deviation in local government rules where if we provide funding which is then used for capital purpose, we are allowed to fund that amount from capital funding streams, so specifically things like capital grants or borrowing. So because of that rule, which is very specific to local government accounting, there will always be a difference, and it is usually quite likely that this funding, this capital spend, which isn't going directly to our capital assets, will then mean that our ratio will be different from the ratio of a private sector. I mean,
sorry, James, but not so much a question of where the capital streams come from, but I suppose more a question of, do we break down that capital investment in terms of how much we put into certain assets to increase the value of those assets? The reason I ask the question is because with the schools programme, for example, we were told all the way through that any overspend was going to be picked up, first of all, by the Welsh Government, and we were told it was going to be picked up by the contractors themselves. And lo and behold, comes back and we agree another £4 million has got to go to those contractors. It's from the residents of the borough really need to know that investment is purposeful, that it shows value on the balance sheet and increases the value in relation to the ratio of investment. So do we have that breakdown?
I think we need to do more analysis to give you that breakdown that you're looking for, particularly across years. At the moment, I could only talk about what's happened in the 24-25 financial year.
Yeah, okay. So presumably when those assets are revalued post capital investment, we will know then exactly how effective it's been. Then is that what you're saying?
I think the actual valuations that take place can be quite volatile, and they can be caused by lots of different factors. So they will be impacted by changes to the economy. So it's quite possible that the value of an asset can change, for instance, because of the general changes to the economy. So that relationship between the spend and the value is always going to be inconsistent because of the nature of the valuation program. It's probably also worth mentioning that the process is that we only value 1/5 of the program, 1/5 of our land and buildings each year. So the valuation exercise that we've undergone this year will be looking at some of the assets, but not all of our assets.
Yeah, I absolutely, I absolutely get that the value will change, but it's a case of we just need to be assured that the investment is worth it long term. So that's good. Just another capital question. The increased £30 million capital borrowing capital borrowing that we've made over the last 12 months, that comes out of the capital borrowing requirement of the revenue account. How much is that costing us for that extra 30 million of the revenue account?
So at the moment, so the total amount that we've paid, so it's effectively the total amount we're currently paying for the capital program, which is this year and previous years, is broken down into both interest, and we also have to pay an amount back of what we borrowed. So we've added together both the interest and the amount that we have to repay back. We get to a figure of around 9 million, but we also are earning some interest, so potentially that figure is a little bit lower, but it's around that region in terms of what we're incurring on the revenue budget in terms of the borrowing that we've had for the capital program.
Yeah, is that the increased amount or the total amount?
That would be the total amount.
Yeah. So my question is, what is that increased by for that 30 million capital investment?
I think it'd be difficult to do a direct comparison at the moment because there's been some changes as well in terms of how we calculate those different elements of the program. It's probably something I can get back to you by pulling these through some analysis on that.
No problem. One on interest then, James, if I may. You mentioned on the revenue income that the interest payments are 2.114 million, which is good to hear. Is there a breakdown of where that comes from, or is that the money we hold? And more specifically, I'd like to know, and this is a question I've asked Craig by email, and no problem if you haven't got the answer, but because I know Craig is looking at it, is of that 2.114 million, how much of that is interest from shared prosperity funding? Because we've had that 31 million that's been held for us, and interest payments have come in from that over the last 3 years between 22 and 25. Obviously, the major amount being later on in the program as we drew down more money. So do we have that information?
I couldn't tell you how specifically of the interest we've earned, how much relates to the shared prosperity grant balances that we're holding. What I can say is that interest is being generated from all the capital, all the cash that we're holding. So all the earmarked reserves, all the balances that we're holding, less any timing differences or day-to-day use of those balances. Where we've got surplus, we would then generate an amount that we can then lend out either short or long term.
So the 2.114 relates to the capital that we hold. I get that. That's great. I'll default to Craig if he has any updated information on the SPF money, but if not, there's no problem.
Yeah, as you say, Councillor Barry, that 2.1 million relates to cash balances that we hold and how we've invested that through the course of the financial year. It is the total of the interest earned, and so it will include the SPF, which, as you alluded to, you have emailed me for a request of that breakdown, and that's being dealt with as we speak by officers.
Great. Thank you very much, Craig. Just the one other question then, back to the earmark reserves. There's a balance reduction of 2 million, you said. How does that relate? It's a broader question in terms of how does that relate to the fact that over the last 2 to 3 years, we've had a mantra of we do not spend our reserves. Our reserves are untouchable. We do not touch them. And you're saying here that we've spent 2 million. So basically on what? And how does that relate to we don't touch reserves?
There's different types of reserves.
Yeah.
A key component of the reserves are grants that we've received. So those grants will be held and are given to us for very specific purposes. And also there can be time limit restrictions attached to those grants. So there will be some elements of those earmark reserves that we need to spend because of the conditions under which we've been given them. It's probably also worth mentioning a key part of that reduction that you referred to relates to schools balances. So the schools has specific earmark reserves as well as the authority, and actually most of the reduction relates to schools balances rather than the council.
But there's nothing come out of the budget reserve or the general reserve.
The general reserve is increasing. So a strategy has been set around that. So what we're talking about is an overall reduction in terms of the bottom line of earmark reserves.
Right. Okay. Lovely. Great. Thanks, James. Thanks, Chair.
Great. Do you want to come back here on the last one?
Yeah, it's worth referring members to note 10 of the statement of accounts, and that gives a detailed breakdown of the earmark reserves held. And just to bring members, obviously remind members, I should say, that as and when the budget for 24-25 was set, there was a planned use of 2.032 million of the budget reserve. And that obviously has been drawn down to in 24-25 as per the approved budget.
So yeah, Councillor Williams, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Just to clarify, just on the back of that, obviously the question, because Councillor Barry referred to the past 12 months, and just to note, obviously we're not looking at calendar months. Obviously this information relates to 31st of March 2025. Just thank you.
Yeah, we are looking a long way back here. We're possibly understand. So my one takeaway from James's slide back earlier on was the utter disparity between the funding sources nowadays. You used to think that council tax made a large slice of funding bundle that the local authority gets, but it's clearly not the case anymore. I believe the government grants were 4-1 over council tax payments, weren't they? I think the council tax take is under 40 million, I think, on a budget of 260 million. Just kind of, I mean, I know that's no different to every other Welsh local authority. I suspect all UK local authorities, but it's I think people might be surprised by that.
Yes. Should I answer that, Chair?
It wasn't really seeking an answer, it's a comment, but yes, absolutely, James. I've got something to say on it, yes.
Yes, so absolutely. I think that's kind of one of the standout figures in the statement of accounts, and clearly the council is very reliant on the size of the grant funding that it's getting, and clearly that's much higher than things like the council tax or the NDR that it gets, and obviously it has less control over that grant funding and is dependent on being in receipt of that. So it makes it just that is an additional and obvious budget challenge.
Thank you, James. I was taken by there's a phrase right at the beginning of the document somewhere that says the council is controlled by Welsh government. I think the language of the statement is, And now I kind of understand why, because what we kind of can't do is very beholden to how much funding we get through various settlements, I guess. I guess that sort of just gently takes me on to sort of the future medium-term financial plans. We've got a budget for this year and the budget for next year has been agreed already. Craig, do you want to talk a little bit about where we are? Because obviously using reserves is not something we can sustain using. So our settlement for this year has been, so for the coming year, is tentatively being agreed.
Thank you, Chair. There was an announcement of the provisional local government settlement on the 24th of November. Since publication of the local government settlement, there was a Welsh Government budget agreement reached, which has improved the position. So for Merthyr Tydfil, after adjustments to the 25-26 aggregated external funding, our increase is 4.7%. There's a report being taken to Cabinet on Wednesday of this week, which has the proposed measures with regards to the budget for 26-27. That currently shows a £509,000 funding gap at this point in time. Following Cabinet, there'll be a series of scrutiny meetings, individual scrutiny meetings held, and a joint, I should say, a combined governance and audit and joint scrutiny session, which will consider the cost reductions included in those reports and other measures. Following that, then there will be a report going to Cabinet and Council for the approval of the budget.
Thank you, Craig. Really helpful to understand how this puts us in the context. Is what we're doing here is looking back, and every time we look back, we always going to bear in mind what's happening for now and looking forward as well. So, last question on the accounts themselves. As you said, they've been handed to Audit Wales. They will now get translated and published on our website. Next steps now in terms of Audit Wales are, as I said, they've been on a meeting last year today. They are currently starting the process of doing the audit. Can you tell us how things are progressing and tell us what our current timelines are?
So it's very early days at the moment. They started last week. We probably will know more in the next few weeks. In terms of the timeline, it's probably still subject to discussion. Obviously, we're hoping that the audit's completed for March, but at the moment it's also early days.
Thank you, and of course the final accounts will come back to this committee for final approval at the suitable dates, March, April, whatever that may be. Thank you, James. Thank you, Craig, for presentations and updates today. Really helpful to understand a complex document. Thanks to your slideshow, which tried to demystify some of it. Don't know if you succeeded or not. You ask everyone on the table offline, but I think it was for me, I thought it was really helpful. Thank you. That's the meat of the meeting. It says here agenda item 7, reflection and evaluation. It was interesting. My only personal reflection is, oh my gosh, this committee was cold. Put my coat on. And agenda item 8 is any other business considered urgent. There isn't any, except to say next governance and audit committee meeting is 5 PM, Monday 23rd of February. But to note, as Craig mentioned, there is the combined scrutiny, joint scrutiny and governance audit committee meeting on the 9th of February, so mark your diaries accordingly. Thank you everyone for your time today. Members, don't disappear off, because with the extra time we have allocated, we are going to segue seamlessly into the training session. So we'll stop the recording and we will segue into that. But officers, you simply don't need to be staying unless you really feel the urge. Thank you, everybody.